What happens when a brilliant mind, a lonely teenage coder, dares to connect the world, only to realize that connection comes at a cost? This is not just the story of Facebook. This is the untold emotional journey of Mark Zuckerberg, the boy who changed the internet but lost a part of himself in the process. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg was born on May 14, 1984, in White Plains, New York, to a well-educated and supportive Jewish family. His father, Edward Zuckerberg, was a dentist, and his mother, Karen, was a psychiatrist. They weren't poor, but they weren't ultra-rich either, just a regular middle-class family with big dreams for their 4 children. Mark was different from the beginning. While other kids played outside, Mark found himself obsessed with computers. His father noticed his curiosity and gifted him the Atari 800 XL, a simple machine, but for Mark it was magic. He wasn't just playing games, he was trying to build them. At just 12 years old, he created his own messaging software called ZuckNet, which his father used in the dental office to communicate with the receptionist. Imagine that, a 12-year-old building tools used for real-world work. Mark's brilliance couldn't be hidden. His parents hired a computer tutor named David Newman, who would later say, "I knew this kid was a prodigy. I just couldn't stay ahead of him." In school, Mark wasn't a social butterfly. He was quiet, awkward, and deeply focused. But what he lacked in popularity, he made up for with a genius-level brain. While at Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the most elite prep schools in the country, he excelled in math, astronomy, physics, and classical studies. He also spoke fluent Latin and won prizes in science and classical literature. But it wasn't just academics. His brain was wired for creation. At night, while others were partying or texting, Mark would sit at his computer, coding for hours, even days. He built an early version of Pandora called Synapse Media Player, which learned users' music tastes and made recommendations. Microsoft and AOL tried to buy it and even offered Mark a job. But he said no. At just 17, Mark turned down massive offers. He wasn't in it for the money. He had something bigger in mind. In 2002, Mark enrolled at Harvard University. Not just any college, the breeding ground of U.S. presidents, billionaires, and Nobel laureates. But even here, Mark didn't quite fit in. He wore flip-flops to class. His dorm room was always filled with whiteboards, pizza boxes, and computer screens. While others partied, Mark stayed in, building code. His friends described him as socially quiet, but mentally unstoppable. Then came the spark that would change everything. One night, frustrated by the elitist nature of Harvard's dating scene, Mark created a controversial website called FaceMash. He hacked into Harvard student directories, pulled pictures of female students, and let users rate who was hotter. It went viral overnight. The servers crashed. The university panicked. Mark was called in front of a disciplinary board. Many students were outraged. He was accused of breaching privacy, of being unethical. But something interesting happened. People couldn't stop talking about it. It proved that the idea of digitally connecting students had power. And Mark knew it. He saw the future, and it had just begun. On February 4, 2004, from his cramped Harvard dorm room, Mark and his friends, Dustin Moskovitz, Eduardo Savarine, Chris Hughes, and Andrew McCollum, launched thefacebook.com. At first, it was meant only for Harvard students, but within 24 hours, hundreds had signed up. Within a month, thousands. Then it spread to Yale, Columbia, Stanford, and suddenly it was exploding across campuses nationwide. Mark dropped out of Harvard, a bold, terrifying decision, but he believed in the mission. He moved to Palo Alto, California, the heart of Silicon Valley, and set up a tiny office. Napster co-founder Sean Parker joined as an advisor and helped secure Facebook's first big investment, $500,000 from Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal. But behind the scenes, things were not so simple. Conflict was brewing. As Facebook grew rapidly, cracks began to appear. First, Eduardo Saverin, his close friend and co-founder, felt betrayed. Eduardo had been handling Facebook's business side, but as investors came in, Mark began freezing him out. The relationship fell apart, and Eduardo sued him. But that wasn't the only lawsuit. The Winklevoss twins, Cameron and Tyler, along with Divya Narendra, accused Mark of stealing their idea. They claimed he had agreed to help build their social site, Harvard Connection, later Connect You, but instead used their code to launch Facebook. Mark denied it, but eventually settled, reportedly paying $65 million in stock and cash. These betrayals and lawsuits marked the beginning of a pattern in Zuckerberg's life. Brilliant innovation followed by emotional fallout. People felt used, friends turned into enemies. And while Facebook was exploding, Mark was losing pieces of himself. By 2006, Facebook was unstoppable. It opened up to anyone with an email address, and users flooded in. From college dorms to small towns, everyone wanted to be on Facebook. But success came with pressure. Zuckerberg, now just 22, was running a multi-billion-dollar company. He was on magazine covers, called a boy genius. But behind the blue hoodie, Mark was battling isolation, sleepless nights, and a fear of failure. The pressure to scale, to stay ahead of competitors like MySpace, was immense. He made tough decisions, including declining a $1 billion acquisition offer from Yahoo. Investors were furious. They thought he was foolish. But Mark stood firm. "I'm here to build something that lasts," he said. "I'm not here to sell out." And he meant it. But emotionally, it was taking a toll. The betrayals, the media pressure, the lawsuits, and the never-ending battle to keep Facebook alive. All of it was beginning to wear him down. Few people talk about the emotional cost Mark paid to build Facebook. In interviews, he often seemed robotic, as if he'd built a wall around his feelings. Friends said he became colder, more distant, more obsessed. He stopped returning calls, stopped smiling. It was as if he believed he had to shut out the world to connect it. And in a strange way, Facebook became a reflection of his inner world. Brilliant, complex, powerful, but also isolating, addictive, and emotionally cold. But then, something changed. In 2012, Mark married his college sweetheart, Priscilla Chan, in a quiet backyard ceremony. She was one of the few people who had seen the real Mark, vulnerable, awkward, emotional. She grounded him, reminded him that the world outside the code still mattered. Later, they would have 2 daughters, and Mark, the tech billionaire who barely blinked in public, broke into tears during their birth announcement video. For once, the wall cracked, and the world saw the man, not just the machine. By 2012, Facebook had reached a milestone that only few companies in history ever touch. It went public. The IPO, initial public offering, was one of the biggest in tech history, valuing Facebook at over $100 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, now just 28, was a billionaire many times over. He rang the opening bell at NASDAQ in his signature hoodie, defying corporate norms, staying true to his nerdy identity. But behind the scenes, Facebook was becoming something Mark had not prepared for, a monster of data. Billions of users, endless personal information, unimaginable power in the hands of one man. Mark had built the most powerful communication tool in the world, but with that power came problems. He was no longer the kid in a dorm room. He was now a gatekeeper of democracy, of global news, of truth itself. But was he ready? In 2016, the unthinkable happened. The U.S. presidential election turned into chaos. Misinformation flooded Facebook. Fake news spread like wildfire. Political ads filled with lies and manipulation were being served to millions, and nobody really knew how or why. Soon, investigators uncovered that foreign governments, including Russia, had used Facebook to influence voters. They created fake pages, fake movements, fake events, all targeting vulnerable minds. Facebook had become a weapon, not of mass destruction, but of mass manipulation. And Mark? He was caught in the crossfire. Lawmakers dragged him into Congress. Cameras captured a young billionaire, now grayer, now more robotic, sitting before angry politicians. "Senator, we run ads," he famously said, a line that would go viral for all the wrong reasons. He looked lost, disconnected. The genius who had connected billions suddenly didn't know how to protect them. And, emotionally, it hit hard. This wasn't just about PR. This was his legacy, his mission, the dream he built with blood and sleepless nights, now being blamed for dividing society. If 2016 shook Facebook, then 2018 nearly broke it. That year, the world discovered that a political data firm called Cambridge Analytica had harvested data from over 87 million Facebook users without permission. They used it to manipulate elections, to divide people, to sell lies. And Facebook had allowed it, not directly, but through negligence. Mark was forced to apologize to the world. "We didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm. That was a big mistake. It was my mistake, and I'm sorry." It was the first time the world heard regret in his voice. The public was outraged. Facebook users began deleting their accounts. Activists called it the surveillance state. And Mark? He was again dragged into hearings, again criticized, again isolated. He had built Facebook to connect people, but he had also helped break trust on a global scale. And in the silence of his private moments, even Mark had to ask himself, "Did I go too far?" While the world raged around him, Mark tried to hold on to his humanity. He and Priscilla Chan had started the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, pledging 99% of their Facebook shares, worth billions, to causes like education, health, and equality. It was his way of giving back. But the internet is not so forgiving. People called it a PR move, a way to dodge taxes, a way to rewrite his image. Mark rarely responded to these attacks, but close friends said he became quieter, colder, even lonelier. The emotional toll of being the world's most controversial tech CEO had scarred him. At night, he would sit in his home, away from the screens, holding his daughters. For a few hours, he was just dad. Not Zuck, not CEO, just a man trying to hold on to what really mattered. In 2021, Mark made a bold, risky move. He announced that Facebook Inc. would become Meta. Why? Because he believed the future was beyond social media. It was in the metaverse. Virtual reality, augmented reality, a digital universe where people could live, work, play, and connect in ways never imagined. It was a massive gamble. Billions were poured into the project. Critics called it escapism. Others said Mark was running from his past, trying to escape Facebook scandals by inventing a new world. But emotionally, this move was personal. "The metaverse is the next frontier," he said. "And from now on, we're going to be Meta first, not Facebook first." This wasn't just business. It was a rebirth, a way to reclaim the dream, a way to reconnect the world without the chaos of algorithms and fake news. But would it work? Or was this just another illusion? Only time would tell. What most people don't see is the emotional war inside Mark Zuckerberg. He is a man of contradictions, a genius who can't always relate to emotion, a father who built tools that can destroy childhood, a privacy advocate who owns the largest surveillance machine in history. He has given the world free tools, but paid for them with his peace. In private, Mark is known to be deeply introspective. He reads philosophy. He practices meditation. He walks in silence through the redwood forests near his California home. But still, the question remains, was for a boy who just wanted to connect college students, to become a man who connects the planet but lives in a world of digital firestorms? The answer isn't so simple. Mark Zuckerberg may have once been known as the emotionless coder, the hoodie-wearing, fast-talking genius who seemed disconnected from reality. But fatherhood changed him. When his daughter Maxima, Max, was born in 2015, Mark did something very few billionaires ever had. He wrote a public letter to her, promising to create a better world for her generation. Your mother and I don't yet have the words to describe the hope you give us for the future. Your new life is full of promise. We want you to grow up in a world better than ours today. He didn't just post a photo. He didn't just celebrate privately. He pledged 99% of his Facebook shares, worth tens of billions, to fight diseases, improve education, and level the playing field for all children. To Mark, this was more than philanthropy. It was an apology, a silent, emotional attempt to balance the scales of a world he had both uplifted and disrupted. In those quiet, private family moments, away from screens, away from boardrooms, Mark began to evolve, not as a CEO, but as a father. And maybe, for the first time in his life, he started truly understanding the human emotions he had once struggled to code into a product. By 2022, Mark had fully shifted gears. Facebook was no longer the center of his universe. Meta was. He was obsessed with the idea of the metaverse, a virtual space where people could exist, create, connect, and work without physical boundaries. VR headsets, digital avatars, decentralized environments, it was the stuff of science fiction, and Mark was betting the company on it. He poured over $36 billion into Reality Labs, the division building Meta's virtual world. To outsiders, it looked like a desperate move, like a man trying to run from his past mistakes. To Mark, it was the only way forward. He believed that real connection could happen in virtual space, maybe even more authentically than on the flawed platforms of the past. But emotionally, the metaverse was more than a business pivot. It was his second chance. His opportunity to finally build something pure before the world, before governments, before corporations corrupted it. But once again, the world doubted him. Stock prices dropped. Critics mocked him. Memes went viral about the soulless metaverse. And Mark? He stayed quiet, but determined. Because that's who he's always been. Not loud, not flashy, not political. Just obsessively focused. We're going to make mistakes, he said, but we'll learn from them and keep moving forward. Was it optimism or denial? Nobody knew. Maybe not even him. Mark Zuckerberg is, without question, one of the most misunderstood figures of our generation. He is a college dropout who outsmarted the world's smartest executives. A socially awkward introvert who built the most social platform in history. A man who wants to bring people together while being accused of tearing society apart. Some see him as a villain, the man who broke democracy. Others see him as a visionary, the one who dared to dream beyond the now. But those who know him best say he is neither. He is simply obsessed. Obsessed with ideas, obsessed with scale, obsessed with building, obsessed with fixing what he breaks, sometimes too late. In a world driven by emotion, Mark was never great at feeling, but he was always great at creating the systems that feel for us. That emotional blindness has cost him friendships, trust, maybe even his legacy. But it also gave him the clarity to build when everyone else hesitated. And maybe, just maybe, that's his real genius. So how will history remember Mark Zuckerberg? As the youngest self-made billionaire? As the creator of Facebook? As the man who turned the internet into a global social experiment? Or will history remember him as the one who broke things faster than he could fix them? His story isn't over. Meta is still evolving. Billions still use his platforms. His influence still touches every corner of modern life, from politics to parenting to privacy. But there's something deeper beneath the numbers, the lawsuits, the code. Mark Zuckerberg is a builder who learned too late that human connection isn't just a product feature. It's a fragile, sacred thing. And maybe, just maybe, in these final chapters of his life, he'll learn to be something greater than just a CEO. Maybe he'll become human again. Mark Zuckerberg didn't ask for this kind of power. He just wanted to build something cool. But what he built changed the world. It connected revolutions. It reunited families. It caused chaos. It amplified lies. It saved lives. And now, sitting atop a digital empire with the weight of a fractured world on his shoulders, Mark lives a paradox. He gave the world a voice, but lost control of the microphone. He built a kingdom, but lives like a prisoner in a castle of criticism. He dreamed of connection, but often finds himself disconnected. And yet, he continues. Because that's who he is. The coder, the creator, the flawed genius. The boy who changed the world and is still trying to understand it.